Hi, this is Stephen, and in this video we will discuss wall motion analysis with echocardiography. And so let's look at the heart. I'm going to section out, let's do that a little better. We've got our basal segment, then we've got mid, then coming down into the apex or apical, and then this would be the apex. Let's draw our right ventricle somewhere up here. So left ventricle with those concentric rings, and then the right ventricle. Let's label that. Got our RV up here, and then all of this down here is our left ventricle. And I'm going to segment it. Let's also just mark the different portions. So this right up here will be the anterior aspect of the left ventricle. This will be the inferior. Over here we have the lateral part of the left ventricle, and then in the middle we have the septal by the septum. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to segment this farther, so just like this. And we'll go through the nomenclature of each of these segments in a second, and then in the middle we can divide it like so. This is called the 17-segment model. What I've done is I've divided the left ventricle into 17 different segments, each of which has a name. So for example, let me shade in this guy right here. What would this be? Well, it's in the outermost ring, so that's basal, and then it's both on the septal side and a little bit anterior, so we would call this the basal anterior anteroseptal segment. How about this one right here? This would be the mid anteroseptal segment. And what about right up here? I'll color this one in. This one would be the basal anterior segment. This one right here would be the mid anterior segment. And then let me shade in these two apical segments, kind of anterior and then septal, apical, as well as the apex. Now, why have I shaded all these in red? All of these tend to be perfused by the left anterior descending. Left anterior descending. Let's keep moving around. So over here on the side, right now I'm shading the basal anterolateral segment, and then this would be the mid anterolateral segment. This would be the apical lateral segment. And then down here, the mid infralateral, and then the basal infralateral. All of these are typically perfused by the circumflex. And then down here, I won't shade this last, but the remainder of these are perfused typically by the right coronary artery. And so what we can do, we can look at the movement of each of these segments of the heart, and if there's abnormalities in motion, and if it fits in a segmental distribution, then we may think about whether that coronary, the blood flow in that coronary is compromised. Now, how do we actually see these segments? Because if we slice through short axis, we'll see maybe just the basal, all the basal segments, but we won't actually see all of these. And so what we do, we actually combine our apical 4-chamber, 2-chamber, and 3-chamber to put this together. How do we do that? Well, I'm going to take take this yellow line here. So the one that's probably easiest to understand and remember is if I slice right through anterior to inferior, and I look at what we have here, that actually corresponds to your 2-chamber view with your left atrium emptying into your left ventricle. And you've got this right here would be the anterior wall, and this would be your inferior wall. And again, let's color this in to match appropriately. So your anterior wall is supplied by the LAD, as we can see from our pie diagram. And then your inferior wall is supplied typically by your RCA. Nothing in this view is supplied by the circumflex. So that's the apical two-chamber view. How about if we slice like this? So I'm coming here from the anteroseptal and I'm cutting across all the way to the inferolateral. Well, that will be this view. Our apical three-chamber. We've got our LA emptying into our LV, and typically we can't see the apex from this view. Got our aortic valve and then our aorta. And which walls are we dealing with here? Well, this over here is the inferolateral, which is supplied by the circumflex. And over here we have our anteroseptal wall, which is supplied by the LAD. And I forgot to draw let me add in our RV would be somewhere right back there. All right, last one. What if we were to slice through like this? Well, that would be our apical four-chamber view. So you've got your left atrium, which empties into your left ventricle. Got your RV over here and your right atrium. And what two walls do we slice through? Well, we sliced through the anterolateral and the inferoseptal. So this will be our inferoseptal. What supplies our inferoseptal? Well, inferoseptal initially is the RCA, but as you go down towards the apex, that's LAD. So we'll say from here onwards is LAD. And then how about over here? So inferoseptal to anterolateral. And our anterolateral is supplied by the circumflex. So I'll color that green over here. And so what we do, we look at our two-chamber, our three-chamber, and our four-chamber, all from the apical views, and we decide which segments are moving normally. That gets a score of 1. Let me draw the scale over here on our left. So normal movement gets a score of 1. Hypokinesis, it's still moving, but moving less than it should, gets a score of 2. Akinesis, it's not moving at all, gets a score of 3. Dyskinesis, meaning it's moving the wrong way, gets a score of 4. And aneurysmal gets a score of 5. And so what we do, for example, if we're looking at our three-chamber view, we'll look at that anteroseptal wall and we'll say, well, what is the basal portion of the anteroseptal wall doing? What is the mid portion of the anteroseptal wall doing? So we'll actually get each of these segments in that pie diagram from the apical four-chamber, the apical two-chamber, and apical three-chamber, and we'll put that together and then report whether there's wall motion abnormalities, and if so, are they in the distribution of a coronary artery.